Something strange is happening in Hawaii. Ordinary milk costs $9 per gallon. But the surprising thing is, this is just an ordinary day in Hawaii. And it has been like this for years. Would you believe me if I told you that this is all because of a law from 1920? How is a law from over 100 years ago still haunting grocery stores across the Hawaiian Islands? Let me explain. Hawaiians pay more for their milk, almost twice as much as the lower 48. It's tempting to chalk this one up to transportation costs. But should shipping milk from the mainland US really double the cost? The math says no. Container shipping is incredibly cheap on a per unit basis. Shipping costs should add $1.50 per gallon. If physically hauling a refrigerated gallon of milk across the Pacific Ocean costs on the order of $1 to $2, but the retail price gap versus the mainland is more like $4 to $5 per gallon, the ocean isn't the main culprit. So let me tell you about the Merchant Marine Act of 1920. Section 27 of the Merchant Marine Act, better known as the Jones Act, requires that all goods transported via water between American ports be carried by ships that are US made, US owned, US operated, and crewed by US citizens or US permanent residents. A ship bearing a foreign flag can carry containers from Asia straight to Hawaii, no problem. But if you want to move milk from California to Hawaii, that is a voyage between two US points. So the law requires that you use a tiny fleet of Jones Act compliant ships. What does this do to shipping costs? It increases them by a lot. Recent estimates put the construction price of a Jones Act compliant product tanker at around $200 to $250 million. A similar ship built in South Korea runs about $45 to $50 million. Jones Act compliant ships cost roughly 4 to 5 times as much to build. Think about that. For the cost of a single American ship, you could have 4 or 5 South Korean ships. Same type, same function, same capacity, but at 1/5 the cost. And it gets even worse than that. Jones Act compliant ships don't just cost more to build, they also cost more to run. According to a 2011 report from the US Maritime Administration, US flag vessels have daily operating costs more than twice their foreign flag counterparts. Put these together and you get a small, high-cost, and quasi-monopoly fleet that serves America's domestic shipping needs. According to a detailed estimate from the Grassroots Institute, the Jones Act is costing Hawaiians $1.2 billion per year. Shipping milk, or anything else from the mainland United States, is expensive. But Hawaii has land for cows, so why can't Hawaii just make its own milk? Well, it can, and it did. But something changed. Local dairies used to supply nearly all of Hawaii's fluid milk. A study funded by the state of Hawaii notes that until 1984, no milk at all was imported. Hawaii's peak milk production in the late 1980s was about 160 million pounds per year. They were totally self-sufficient. But now they import 90% of their milk. They have one remaining dairy farm. What happened? Why are Hawaiians producing less of their own milk, especially when milk is so expensive? Basic economics would suggest that higher prices provide an incentive for more Hawaiian dairies to open, and yet the opposite has happened. Hawaiian dairies are actually shutting down. There are 3 big reasons for this. First, land. Pasture takes up a lot of space, and space is a limited commodity in Hawaii. Hawaii has the most expensive land of all 50 US states. Hawaii's entire agriculture sector accounts for 1% of Hawaii's GDP. Tourism accounts for a whopping 22% of the state's GDP. So anytime Hawaii has to choose between land for cows and land for tourists, the human visitors win out. It should come as no surprise then that Hawaii's one remaining commercial dairy, Cloverleaf, is on Hawaii Island, the Big Island. That big island has more agricultural land and fewer resorts. The second big reason that Hawaii's dairies keep disappearing is environmental regulation. Every US state has to follow the Federal Clean Water Act, but Hawaii has to be especially careful because almost the whole state is essentially coastline. Even when you get further inland, Hawaii is full of steep slopes. It has thin volcanic soil, and there are many shallow aquifers. Whatever runs off of a pasture or lagoon is likely to end up in someone's stream or snorkeling spot. The Hawaii Department of Health takes a zero-tolerance stance on livestock waste, especially compared to a lot of mainland farm states. It's possible to create dairies with zero discharge systems, but those are expensive. The costs have crushed the smaller dairies that used to supply a lot of Hawaii's milk. A 10,000 cow operation from California still has to deal with the Clean Water Act regulations, but it can amortize the expenses over a much larger volume of milk compared to a 500 cow dairy, like the ones that you'll find in Hawaii. The third big reason that Hawaii's dairies can't stick around is the need for feed. Even if you get the land and the government approval to run a dairy farm, cows still need calories. Where do those calories come from? Modern dairy cows are usually fed a mix of pasture and forage combined with energy-dense feeds like corn and soy. Hawaii doesn't have a big grain belt like the mainland United States. Hawaii has some tropical grass, but Hawaii's tropical grass is a precious resource, and when that precious resource is fed to livestock, it's reserved for beef cows, not dairy cows. Even back in the 1970s, reports noted that except for some grazing for beef cattle, practically all livestock feed must be imported. So Hawaiian dairies buy a lot of their feed from the mainland United States. And when I say Hawaii imports a lot of their livestock feed, I do mean a lot, like upwards of 95% of it. And that feed arrives, naturally, by ship, specifically a Jones Act compliant ship. Yes, the same 1920 law that makes milk more expensive to import also makes livestock feed more expensive to import. There is no getting around the Jones Act, even if you use your own dairy cows. A 2016 article in Hawaii Business reports that just the cost of shipping doubles the total price of feed by the time it reaches local producers. And feed itself accounts for the majority of the total cost of raising animals. The Jones Act isn't just bad for Hawaii. The same law that makes Hawaiians pay more for milk makes it more expensive for Americans on the East Coast to fill their gas tanks. Gulf states like Texas and Louisiana have the biggest concentration of oil refineries in the country. But shipping fuel from Texas up the coast to Boston costs roughly 3 times as much as shipping it all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to Europe, because Jones Act ships are so expensive. Sit with that for a second. It is cheaper to ship American fuel to England than to New England. All because the Jones Act created an artificial monopoly for a handful of shipyards and carriers that allow them to keep prices high and supply low. The real irony of the Jones Act is that it has actually accomplished the opposite of its original goals. When Congress passed the Merchant Marine Act in 1920, it was trying to lock in America's shipbuilding dominance. During World War I, the US had an emergency shipbuilding program. America became the world's second biggest maritime power, behind only England. America controlled roughly 22% of the world's merchant shipping tonnage. The idea behind the Jones Act seemed noble at the time. The goal was to keep America's industrial base alive. The thinking was that requiring US to US shipping to use American ships would guarantee domestic demand for American ships. More demand, more building, and stronger industry, or so the theory went. But the law that was meant to make America's shipbuilding strong has actually made it weak. Embarrassingly weak. China, South Korea, and Japan now build over 90% of the world's large ocean-going ships. How much does America build? Would you believe me if I said 2%? Well, America doesn't build 2%, it builds 1/10 of 2%. This from the country that used to build 22%, that used to be number 2 in the world. In 2022, China had nearly 1,800 large commercial ships on its order book. South Korea had over 700, and Japan over 500. The United States had 5. Not 500, 5. In short, the policy designed to protect American shipbuilding presided over the near total collapse of American shipbuilding. The law that was meant to make America strong at sea has made America almost invisible at sea, and it has made life more expensive for everyone. It's not just Hawaiians who are affected by high domestic shipping prices. The same law that makes milk more expensive for Hawaiians makes it more expensive for New Englanders to get oil shipped from Texas. The East Coast can't afford to get lumber shipped from the Pacific Northwest. So if the Jones Act is obviously broken to this extent, why does it still exist? Well, the people who benefit from the Jones Act are very, very good at keeping it alive. Remember how I said American ships cost 5 times as much as the ones from countries like South Korea? That price gap is the whole business model. a tiny number of shipyards and carriers charge exorbitant prices because no one is allowed to compete with them on domestic shipping routes. And then they use a fraction of those profits to make sure that the law never changes. This is what economists call concentrated benefits, diffuse costs. The Jones Act hurts everyone, but no individual family is going to fly to Washington to lobby over $9 milk. But the two shipping companies that control virtually all of Hawaii's shipping, Matson and Pasha, both sit on the board of the Jones Act's biggest lobbying group. Matson alone pulls in $3.4 billion a year. The whole maritime industry spends over $20 million a year on lobbying to keep this law alive. But when your captive market is worth billions, spending a few million to protect it is the best deal in Washington. And Matson isn't even subtle about it. In their own annual report, the document that they published for investors, they write that if the Jones Act were ever repealed and competitors could enter the market with lower costs, their business would be, quote, adversely affected. They're openly admitting that the only thing standing between you and cheaper shipping costs is a law from 1920, and the money that they spend to keep it alive. The Jones Act is a perfect example of how a law can completely fail at its original stated purpose and survive anyway, because the people that it benefits are organized and the people that it hurts aren't organized. It's easier for us to just keep paying $9 a gallon for milk, or to keep paying the extra cost of gas at the gas pump. The world is full of problems like this. Problems where we already know what's wrong, and we already know what better looks like, and the only question is whether we care enough to get there. The good news is that the world can be better than it is today, but it can only become better if we choose to make it better.